They say you can't put a price tag on family. But in America, where a single hospital stay can cost more than a house, you absolutely can. My name is Mark, and for 42 years, I thought I was a son. I thought the reason my parents were hard on me was because they wanted me to succeed. I thought the distance between us was just a generational difference. I was wrong. I wasn't a son. I was an insurance policy. I was the backup plan stored in the garage, waiting to be dusted off when the golden child, my brother Greg, finally crashes life into a wall. See, my family operates like a corporation. You're either an asset or a liability. And 5 years ago, I walked away because I refused to be treated like an employee. I thought I was out. I thought I was free. But then, the phone rang, and I learned that toxic families don't just want your obedience. Sometimes, they want your blood. It started on a Sunday, the kind of Sunday you work hard for. Quiet. The football game was on mute. I had a coffee in one hand and a book in the other. My life, finally, was peaceful. Then, my phone buzzed on a coffee table. I looked down. Dad. I stared at the screen. I hadn't spoken to my father in 5 years. Not since the day I walked out of the ICU alone, but we'll get to that. My thumb hovered over the red decline button. That's what I should have done. I should have declined, blocked, and went back to my coffee. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. I picked up. I didn't say anything. I just listened. I expected screaming. I expected the usual guilt trip about how I was an ungrateful brat. But I didn't get that. Hey, Mark, is that you, son? His voice was trembling. It was soft, warm. It sounded like the father I wished I had when I was 10 years old. Your mother and I, we were just sitting here, looking at the old photo albums. The ones from the trip to the Grand Canyon. You remember? You were wearing that ridiculous cowboy hat. He laughed. A weak, nostalgic laugh. I felt a tightness in my chest. A tiny, stupid part of me thought, maybe they changed. Maybe they're getting old, and they realize that money and status aren't everything. I cleared my throat. I remember, Dad. Why are you calling? The silence on the other end lasted just a second too long. Then came the pivot. The charm offensive ended, and the sales pitch began. It's Greg, Mark. He's in a bad way. His kidneys are failing. The lifestyle caught up to him. The doctors say he needs a transplant, but the waiting list. Mark, the list is 5 to 7 years. He doesn't have that kind of time. I stayed silent. I knew exactly where this was going. We've been tested. Mom and I, we're too old. Our blood pressure is too high. But you were always the healthy one. You were always the strong one. And there it was. The healthy one. Not the son we miss. Not the person we want to see. Just a compatible set of organs walking around with a phone number. I asked the question that would shatter the illusion. Dad, does Greg have insurance? The warmth in his voice evaporated instantly. You know Greg is an entrepreneur, Mark. He's between plans right now. The out-of-pocket costs for dialysis they're destroying our retirement. We're burning through cash just to keep him stable. If you come in, just for a screening, we could fix this. We could be a family again. Fix this. He didn't mean fix the relationship. He meant fix the leak in their bank account. I told him I'd think about it, and I hung up. To understand why that phone call made me sick to my stomach, you have to understand the dynamic. Every toxic family has roles. It's like a play you never auditioned for. My brother, Greg, was the investment. Greg was the star quarterback. Greg was the prom king. Greg was the one they poured money into, private coaches, fraternity dues, bail money when he got caught driving drunk. They viewed Greg as a high-risk, high-reward stock. They thought he'd marry rich or become a CEO and carry them into a life of luxury. Pause 0.5s me. I was the insurance policy. I was the boring one. Good grades. State college because it was cheaper. Accounting degree. I was the safe bet. The one they kept around in case the investment failed. But the moment I realized I was nothing more than a resource to them happened 5 years ago. The event that made me go no contact. I was 37. I had an appendix rupture that I ignored for too long because I was working 80-hour weeks. By the time I collapsed, I was septic. My organs were shutting down. I woke up in the ICU with tubes down my throat and a doctor telling me I was lucky to be alive. I was scared. I was alone. So, I did what anyone does when they're terrified. I called my parents. They didn't answer. For 2 days, I lay in that hospital bed, listening to the beeping of the monitor, watching other patients get visits from their families. I watched a father in the bed next to me hold his son's hand for 6 hours straight. And I waited. Finally, on day 3, my mother picked up the phone. I could hear music in the background, clinking glasses, laughter. "Mark, why are you calling so much? We're at the resort. Greg is proposing to Tiffany tonight. We are at the buffet right now." I whispered into the phone. I told her I was in the ICU. I told her I almost died. I expected her to drop the phone. I expected her to say, "We're on the next flight." Instead, she sighed. A long, heavy sigh of annoyance. "Oh, Mark, stop being so dramatic. You have that good corporate insurance, don't you? You have the best doctors. You don't need us there hovering over you. We paid for that degree so you could handle yourself. Don't ruin your brother's moment." She hung up. Don't ruin your brother's moment. That was the night the son died. I realized then that in the United States of America, if you have good health insurance, you don't need parents. And if you don't have money, you don't have value. I recovered alone. I pay my bills alone, and I never called them back. Until now. Now, the tables had turned. Greg, the golden boy, had partied his way into kidney failure. And because he was too free-spirited to hold down a corporate job, he had no insurance. He was draining their bank account dry. They didn't call me because they loved me. They called me because I was the only asset left they hadn't liquidated yet. And they were about to find out that this asset was frozen. I didn't say no. Not immediately. I told them I needed a week to think about it. That was the mistake. Or maybe it was the smartest thing I could have done. Because in that week, they showed me their hand. They didn't scream or threaten. They did something much more insidious. They started the campaign. 2 days after the call, a package arrived at my apartment. It was a tin of homemade cookies. Oatmeal raisin. My favorite when I was 12. There was a note attached, written in my mother's shaky cursive. "Thinking of you. Love, Mom." Then came the emails. Scans of old family photos. Me and Greg building a treehouse. Me and Greg at the beach. Subject line, "Better times." It was love bombing. Textbook manipulation. They were trying to rewrite history. They wanted to erase 5 years of silence with a tin of cookies and a few JPGs. They were trying to manufacture a relationship so they could harvest a resource. But they didn't stop at cookies. They weaponized the community. I got an email from Pastor Miller. I haven't been to that church in 15 years, but somehow he had my work email. The subject line read, "A family in crisis." The body of the email was a masterpiece of guilt. It quoted scripture. It talked about the sacred bond of brotherhood. It said, "Mark, your parents are suffering. Greg is suffering. God has given you the power to heal this family. To turn away now would be to turn your back on your faith." I stared at the screen. They had told the church a sob story. They painted me as the prodigal son holding a grudge, and themselves as the saintly parents just praying for a miracle. But I'm an accountant. I don't look at miracles. I look at numbers. I called a cousin of mine, one of the few who still talk to me, mostly because he despised my parents too. I asked him what the real situation was. He laughed when I asked. He told me the truth. He said, "Mark, they aren't just worried about Greg dying. They're worried about the country club. Apparently, Greg's treatments were costing them $6,000 a month out of pocket because they insisted on private clinics instead of state facilities. They were burning through their liquidity. They had already refinanced the beach house. If Greg went on long-term dialysis without insurance, they would be bankrupt in 2 years. They would lose the status they had spent 40 years building. That's when it clicked. They didn't want my kidney to save Greg's life. They wanted my kidney to save their net worth. I wasn't a donor. I was a financial bailout wrapped in skin. So, I decided to meet them. I agreed to meet them for dinner. Neutral ground. I picked a restaurant, a steakhouse downtown. Expensive. The kind of place my father used to take clients to impress them. I arrived 5 minutes early. I sat at the bar and watched them walk in. They looked older. My father walked with a cane. My mother looked tired, her face tight with stress. And Greg looked like a ghost. His skin was gray, his eyes sunken, but he was wearing a tailored suit. Even as his body failed, the image had to be maintained. They spotted me. The smiles they put on were blinding. It was a performance. My mother hugged me. She held on a little too long. She smelled like expensive perfume and desperation. "Oh, Mark," she whispered. "It's so good to see you." We sat down. The waiter came. Greg ordered the ribeye, medium rare, and a scotch. I looked at him. "Should you be drinking that?" Greg smirked. The old arrogance was still there, lurking under the sickness. "One drink won't kill me, Mark. Besides, we're celebrating, right?" He looked at me, expecting me to nod, expecting me to say, "Yes, we're celebrating my submission." I didn't smile. I just ordered water. We made small talk for 20 minutes. The weather, the traffic, my job. They asked polite questions about my firm, nodding enthusiastically at everything I said. It was the most attention they had paid to my career in my entire life. Then, the plates were cleared. My father cleared his throat. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick manila folder. He slid it across the white tablecloth. "We took the liberty of getting the paperwork started," he said. His voice was smooth, businesslike. "These are the donor intent forms for St. Jude's. And we also put together a plan for the recovery." I opened the folder. It wasn't just medical forms. It was a contract. "What is this?" I asked, pointing to the second document. "It's just logistics," my mother said quickly. "Since you'll be out of work for recovery and Greg will need care, we thought it would be best if you both stayed at the lake house. We've hired a nursing service to come in during the day, but the cost is, well, it's significant. We were hoping, since your salary is quite substantial now, you could handle the nursing costs as your contribution to the family recovery." I stared at her. They wanted my organ, and they wanted me to pay for the privilege of recovering from the surgery. They wanted me to fund the nurses for the brother who bullied me for 18 years. I closed the folder. I looked my mother in the eye. "And what if I'm not a match?" I asked. "What if the tests come back negative?" The smile on her face didn't just fade. It shattered. "Don't say that," she snapped. Her voice was sudden, sharp, loud enough that the table next to us turned to look. "You have to be a match. We can't afford the alternative. Do you have any idea what the premiums are for the next year of care? We can't keep hemorrhaging money like this." There was the slip. She didn't say, "We can't lose Greg." She said, "We can't keep hemorrhaging money." I knew everything I needed to know. The trap was set, and they just walked right into it.